Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to unpack a massive global mystery today. For, 4 decades, three little words basically ran the global economy, made in China. From the clothes we wear to the phones in our pockets, China was the undisputed factory of the world. But recently, you've probably noticed something shifting. Today, we're going to explore why that iconic label seems to be vanishing from our favorite gadgets. And we're going to ask an absolutely crucial question. Are we witnessing the collapse of Chinese manufacturing dominance, or is it all just an illusion? I mean, think about it. If you grab an older iPhone, you know exactly what the back says, assembled in China. But look at a newer model, especially if you're in the US, and that text, it's changing. You're increasingly going to see assembled in India or maybe Vietnam. The headlines are out there screaming that the era of Chinese manufacturing is over, and multinationals are running for the exits. But does a simple label change really mean the end of China's absolute grip on global supply chains? Let's figure out what's actually triggering the shift. So, let's look at the forces that are seemingly shattering the factory of the world. There are three massive shocks that totally upended the status quo here. First up, rising wages. The whole cheap labor advantage China had back in the 90s, yeah, that's gone. Average salaries there have literally more than doubled in just the last decade. Second, we've got intense geopolitical tariffs stemming from the US-China trade war. And third, and this was the real wake-up call, the COVID-19 supply chain shocks. Remember 2022? China's strict zero-COVID lockdowns shut down major hubs, including Zhengzhou, literally the world's biggest iPhone factory. That one single event showed every major multinational on the planet that putting all your production eggs in one basket was a disaster waiting to happen. But while COVID was the spark, this number right here is the hammer, 145%. When you're looking at a peak tariff rate hitting Chinese goods entering the US market by 2025, the math just breaks. It's a pure, overnight mathematical shock that made final assembly in China completely unviable if you want to sell to the US market. Which brings us to how corporate giants actually reacted to this great supply chain shift. Virtually every multinational hit the panic button and triggered a survival strategy called China Plus One. The idea is pretty simple, actually. Keep some of your production in China, sure, but frantically build up a strong secondary manufacturing hub in another country. It's an insurance policy. Tariffs hit, factory lockdown, no problem. You've got a backup plan ready to go. And honestly, nobody has executed this faster or more aggressively than Apple. Just look at the speed of this migration. It's absolutely staggering. Back in the second quarter of 2024, only 13% of US-bound Apple smartphones were made in India. Fast forward just 1 year, that exploded to 44%. That is a massive 240% year-over-year growth. It's moving so fast that India has actually officially overtaken China as the top exporter of smartphones to the United States. But let's peel back the reality for a second and look at the limits of these new contenders: India, Vietnam, and Mexico. Because when you look past the hype, the data shows some pretty severe limitations. Take India. They offer huge government incentives like the PLI scheme, but companies hit a massive wall of heavy bureaucracy and a huge component gap. Sure, they can put the phones together, but they aren't making the internal parts. Then there's Vietnam. They boast a highly competitive 0.7% electronics tariff, which makes them a quiet winner. But their constraint? Scale. They have a population of about 97 million. They simply lack the human scale to replace China. And Mexico, zero tariffs under USMCA and same-week delivery to the US sounds perfect, right? Well, they're dealing with severe water scarcity in industrial zones and real operational risks from cartels controlling transport routes. The big takeaway here, these hubs are fantastic for final assembly, but they absolutely lack the deep, seamless ecosystem that China spent 4 decades building. And here is the twist. China isn't just sitting there retreating. They're making a massive strategic upgrade. China is totally leveling up. Get this, they still hold roughly 30% of global manufacturing added value. That's more than the US, Germany, Japan, and South Korea combined. But here's the real kicker. They are intentionally letting those cheap assembly jobs go. Why? To completely dominate the high-tech, high-margin sectors. In 2024, China produced more electric vehicles than the rest of the entire world put together. They control 80% of the global solar panel supply, they dominate lithium batteries, and they're world leaders in advanced robotics. They're trading cheap labor to own the technologies of the future. And honestly, they kind of have to do this because of a massive demographic time bomb. Thanks to the legacy of the one-child policy, their working-age population is shrinking and aging rapidly. The era of endless, cheap human labor is literally over. So what's their explicit strategy? An all-out automation race. Right now, China is the world's largest buyer of industrial robots. They're deploying more robots every single year than the rest of the planet combined. They are frantically racing to replace human workers with machines before that demographic decline chokes their manufacturing output. Which brings us to the final and maybe most important point, the illusion of decoupling. Who is really in control here? A supply chain analysis from late 2025 hit the nail right on the head. It said China's manufacturing model is not collapsing, it is repositioning. That is the central thesis here. Corporations are basically just playing a game of geographic arbitrage to dodge US tariffs. They're moving the location of the final assembly, sure, but they are not achieving true, deep diversification away from Chinese ownership and Chinese components. Let's put this into perspective. Think about a $1,000 iPhone. The actual assembly, the part that just moved to India, that costs roughly 30 bucks. That is a measly 3% of the device's total retail value. The other 97%, the precision engineering, the advanced displays, the complex batteries, that value is captured elsewhere. And overwhelmingly, it still traces right back to East Asia and China. Just follow the journey of pretty much any modern device. Step 1, the raw materials, things like rare earths, are mostly mined and processed in China. Step 2, those materials are turned into highly complex, precision components, again, mostly in China. Step 3, those finished parts are shipped off to Vietnam, India, or Mexico for that final assembly. And finally, step 4, the product lands in the US retail market, totally bypassing those heavy China-specific tariffs. So while that factory in Mexico or Vietnam neatly avoids the tax, behind the scenes, they're frequently using Chinese financing, Chinese machinery, Chinese trained managers, and entirely Chinese upstream components. So ultimately, the label changed, sure, but the industrial DNA, it's exactly the same. The world isn't really decoupling from China, it's just redistributing the final, lowest value step of the whole process to avoid a tariff. That massive, deep ecosystem of suppliers, engineers, and raw materials that China spent 40 years building, you can't just replicate that overnight, or even in a few years. So the next time you flip over a shiny new gadget and see assembled in India or assembled in Vietnam, I want you to remember the massive, hidden supply chain iceberg lurking just beneath the surface. The label changed, but who controls the components inside? It's a question that really forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the global economy. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.